Neja, coming up in the next 1 hour. World leaders express wish in Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar's death, blooms hope of truce in West Asia.
While this is not the end of the war in Gaza, it's the beginning of the end.
US President Joe Biden to discuss Ukraine with allies on a swift swan-song trip to Berlin. North Carolinians cast ballots on first day of early voting. Kamala Harris shifts campaign strategy as anxiety rises over Donald Trump's gains in polls. In Malawi, India's President Draupadi Murmu holds bilateral talks with her counterpart Lazarou Chakwera on strengthening ties between the two countries. And in cricket, Rachin Ravindra's powerful knock propelled New Zealand to 402 on day 3 of the first test against India at Bengaluru's Chinnaswamy Stadium. The Israel army has released a video showing the military operations in Lebanon that have killed Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas, last night. The killing marks a huge success for Israel and a pivotal moment in the year-long conflict. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu warned that the war in Gaza is not over and will only be over when all hostages are returned. Killed Yahya Sinwar, the Hamas leader and architect of the October 7th attacks, whose actions triggered the conflict. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu described the alleged killing of Hamas leader as beginning of the end of the year-long conflict. Speaking after the military confirmed it had killed the Hamas leader, Benjamin Netanyahu said that there could be an end to the conflict in Gaza if Hamas laid down their arms and returned all hostages.
Yahya Sinwar is dead. He was killed in Rafah by the brave soldiers of the Israel Defense Forces. While this is not the end of the war in Gaza, it's the beginning of the end. To the people of Gaza, I have a simple message. This war can end tomorrow. It can end if Hamas lays down its arms and returns our hostages.
Global leaders hailed Israel's killing of Hamas chief Yahya Sinwar. Taking to social media on Thursday, leaders urgently called for an end to the Gaza conflict, citing further escalation in the region. In comments to reporters after landing in Germany, US President Joe Biden said he had congratulated Netanyahu on Sinwar's death, adding that it is a good day for Israel and for the world. While Vice President Kamala Harris said that the death of Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar offered an opportunity to finally end the conflict in Gaza.
It's a good day for the world. I call these now to congratulate him getting Sinwar. He had a lot of blood in his hands. American blood, Israeli blood, and others. And I told him that we were really pleased with his actions. And further that now's the time to move on.
Today, Israel confirmed that Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas, is dead, and justice has been served. And the United States, Israel, and the entire world are better off as a result. Sinwar was responsible for the killing of thousands of innocent people, including the victims of October 7 and hostages killed in Gaza. He had American blood on his hands. Today, I can only hope that the families of the victims of Hamas feel a sense and measure of relief.
Terming the death of Hamas chief a turning point, French President Emmanuel Macron said it offered a crucial opportunity to end Israel-Hamas conflict in Gaza.
This day is a turning point, as well as a military success for Israel. I think, as I say to the Israeli families of October 7, this occasion should be seized upon so that all hostages can be freed and so that the war can finally be stopped. Indeed, it is necessary to put an end to military operations and after this result, accept a ceasefire in Gaza to finally open a credible political perspective for both Israelis and Palestinians.
Speaking to media after a meeting with EU leaders in Brussels, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz said Sinwar was responsible for the terrible, brutal, inhumane attack by Hamas on Israeli citizens on October 7th in the worst possible way. When asked about reports of the death of the Hamas leader, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said that the death of Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar is certainly significantly weakening Hamas.
The leader of a terrorist organization, the terrorist organization of Hamas, and he was basically the mastermind behind the 7th of October with the killings, the massacres, the rapes and the kidnapping. So his death is certainly significantly weakening Hamas.
EU Commission Vice President and EU Foreign Affairs Chief Josep Borrell said that Sinwar was an obstacle to an urgently needed ceasefire and the unconditional release of all hostages. With Hamas already weakened and more than a year into the Gaza conflict, Sinwar's death deals an immense blow to the organization. But Netanyahu, in his speech announcing Sinwar's death, indicated that Israel's conflicts in Gaza were not yet over and vowed to bring all the hostages home. Bureau Report, DD India. The Israel army has released a video showing military operations in Lebanon. Meanwhile, Hezbollah has announced a new and escalating phase of its conflict with Israel. In a statement early on Friday, the group said the Islamic Resistance Operations Room have decided that Israel will be targeted in the coming days. The statement reads, Hezbollah announces a transition to a new and escalatory phase in the confrontation with the Israeli enemy, which will be reflected in the developments and events of the coming days. The announcement that came after the death of Hamas leader made no mention of the Hamas chief. On to the other conflict raging in Ukraine. Kiev on Friday claimed to have shot down 80 of 135 Russian drones. The Russian Defense Ministry hit several Ukrainian targets, including drone, warehouse, ammunition depots, and the energy infrastructure of military enterprises, and shut down Ukraine's air defense system. It shut down several rockets and drones. Russia also repelled an attack by Ukraine in Kursk region and targeted Ukraine's armored vehicles and multiple rocket launchers. Meanwhile, Russia has claimed control of over one more settlement in eastern Ukraine. NATO defense ministers gathered in Brussels for the second day of the summit on Friday. The meeting is being held under the new NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. The agenda of the meet is to come up with proposals on how to modernize the entire standardization process. The leaders will also discuss continuing military aid to Ukraine. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and NATO chief Mark Rutte presented a unified front in Brussels that followed Kiev's pitch for victory to EU leaders and NATO defense ministers. Mark Rutte said that NATO members will not lose their shared will to support Ukraine, and Russian President Vladimir Putin would be wrong to think otherwise. Rutte also said that it was essential that NATO continued to provide Ukraine with military aid. Zelensky also reminded his allies that some commitments made at the NATO summit in July were still waiting to be fulfilled.
Strengthening of Ukraine, it's not only depending on the weapon, this kind or that kind, it depending on the will. If our partners will not lose their unity, we will not lose.
We will not lose that unity.
It's
you
so
can count
important.
on that. And my message today to Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin is that if he thinks we will not. And today again is evidence. Look what the Australians have done, what the Germans are doing, what the US has done today. Again, announcing almost $500 million in anti-missile defense systems.
Strengthening of Ukraine, it's not only depending on the weapon, this kind or that kind, it depending on the will. If our partners will not lose their unity, we will not lose.
US President Joe Biden is in Berlin to discuss Russia's conflict with Ukraine with key European partners. Biden, on his short trip, will hold meetings with UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, French President Emmanuel Macron on the issue of Russia, Ukraine and West Asia conflicts. The US President will also hold bilateral talks with Germany's counterpart Frank-Walter Steinmeier and German Chancellor Olaf Scholz. Joe Biden will also be greeted with military honors and will receive Germany's highest order of merit from German President during the visit. European Union leaders agreed on Thursday to use all their leverage, including trade development aid and visa policy, to speed up returns of migrants illegally entering the bloc and asked the European Commission to urgently draft a law for the same. Immigration is a highly sensitive topic in most of the bloc's 27 member states. EU leaders also discussed setting up return hubs in countries outside the EU where migrants whose EU asylum bids were refused could await deportation to their home country, providing it was safe to return there. Out of the 484,000 non-EU citizens ordered to leave the EU last year, only 20% returned home. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said that the Commission was working to improve this number and would soon present a law to deal with it.
We see that all those who have no right to stay in the European Union, only 20% of those who have a return decision really are returned to their countries of origin. So we're working to improve this operational work, and we will soon present a new proposal, legislative proposal for that.
Not all leaders were enthusiastic about the idea of setting up return hubs. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz said that for a country as big as Germany, asylum processing hubs outside the bloc would only be able to handle a fraction of requests.
It is clear that irregular migration must be reduced. You know that we have taken measures in Germany by improving and speeding up our own procedures, by introducing border controls, which have led to a significant reduction in the number of people arriving in Germany irregularly. And we will continue along with this path. Opt-out is not provided for. They both know that. The Dutch have even said so.
Further, Spanish Socialist Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez said that migration was a positive phenomenon and something that Spain and other European economies desperately needed to prop up ailing birth rates and their welfare states.
If we want to face the demographic challenge in Europe, if we want to ensure the sustainability of our pensions and the welfare state, and also guarantee the economic growth that Spain or Europe as a whole are currently experiencing, we also need the contribution of migration, and that migration has to be regular, safe and orderly. I say it clearly. We are not in favor of those kinds of formulas because they do not address any of the problems and create new ones. They do not tackle the issues and create new problems.
On to the Asia-Pacific now. Tensions on the Korean peninsula reached a new high after North Korean leader Kim Jong-un declared South Korea a hostile state. This follows a constitutional amendment that formally drops the goal of reunifying the two Koreas. Speaking at the Second Corps headquarters, Kim emphasized the growing threat from the South Korea-US alliance and their enhanced military maneuvers, calling for a stronger North Korean nuclear deterrent. North Korea has blasted road and rail links with the South, signaling not just the physical severing of ties, but what Kim calls the end of the evil relationship with Seoul. He declared that this marks the complete removal of any hope for reunification, pushing forward a two-state system. In the heart of a tense geopolitical landscape, Taiwanese President Lai Ching-te stood before the personnel of the Coast Guard, the salty breeze from the nearby sea mingling with the gravity of his words. The backdrop of his speech was laden with significance, particularly in the context of the Taiwan Strait, a region fraught with territorial disputes and military posturing. Lai highlighted Taiwan's unwavering commitment to its sovereignty amid escalating tensions with China, which had recently conducted military drills in proximity to the island. He praised the Coast Guard personnel who had been on high alert during these exercises. Still to come on DD India News Hour. Anxieties rise in both camps as campaigning reaches the last leg for the US presidential elections. His music was a light in our lives. Fans world over hold vigil for singer Liam Payne.
Geopolitics and trade deals. Economic challenges amid development. Hard work and the path to prosperity. It's the economy always. Between walkers, money is what money does and says. Supply creates its own demand. Between the bulls pulls and bears tears. When supply chains globalization and India rises to the podium. We'll get you centered with the economic brief at 8 p.m. every Thursday on DD India.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India News Hour. I am Tanvi Taneja. Early voting was underway in the presidential battleground of North Carolina just weeks after Hurricane Helene left some residents still without power, running water and phone service. North Carolina would be crucial. North Carolina could be crucial in determining a winner in the US presidential race, as its voting preferences could swing either way. Supporters of both Harris and Trump were vocal as Hurricane Helene, which killed more than 200 people across 6 states, has sparked questions on how it might impact voter turnout. Polls show a very tight race with a handful of swing states likely to determine the winner, as Trump and Harris are in a dead heat in North Carolina. A survey showed Trump with 48% support in state polls as compared to Harris, who's got 47.5% support. Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump made digs at his opponent, Democrat Kamala Harris, and embattled New York Mayor Eric Adams while touching upon his own legal troubles in his speech at a charity gala. The annual A.I. Smith dinner, which benefits Catholic charities, is a New York bipartisan tradition that attracts the city's elite and extends back almost 80 years. In the past, it has been known for being an evening when candidates could gently mock themselves and their opponents. Harris was the first major party presidential candidate since Democrat Walter Mondale in 1984 to skip the event. Instead, the vice president campaigned in Wisconsin, a crucial battleground state. Trump spoke against Harris's no-show and noted that Mondale was trounced by Republican Ronald Reagan in 1984 presidential contest.
Always it's a rule. You got to go to the dinner. You got to do it. Otherwise, bad things are going to happen to you from up there. You can't do what I just saw on that screen. But my opponent feels like she does not have to be here, which is deeply disrespectful to the event and in particular to our great Catholic community. Very disrespectful.
Meanwhile, during a campaign event in La Crosse in Wisconsin on Thursday, U.S. Democratic presidential candidate Kamala Harris lambasted former President Donald Trump for calling January 6th, when his supporters stormed into the Capitol Hill to try to overturn his 2020 defeat, a day of love.
What did Donald Trump say last night about January 6th? He called it a, quote, a day of love. But it points out something that everyone here knows. The American people are exhausted with his gaslighting. Exhausted with his gaslighting. Enough! We are ready to turn the page.
Further, Harris said that the U.S. election is going to be a tight race until the very end. She was speaking at a rally in Green Bay in Wisconsin.
So, Green Bay, we have 19 days until Election Day. 19 days. So we are entering the home stretch. And this is going to be a tight race until the very end. Look, we are the underdog, and that's why we are, and I am campaigning to earn every single vote, because I intend to be a president for all Americans.
Rise of the Indian American community in the US is in focus this election season. Indian origin Deputy Mayor of New York, Meera Joshi, in an exclusive conversation with DD India's Shubhendu Ghosh, spoke about her shared cultural heritage, the migrant crises, and priorities for New York in this election.
5 million Indian Americans in the United States. It may be a small percentage of the population, but they're playing increasingly important, often leadership role in diverse domains of the American society. I have with me one such leader, the Deputy Mayor of New York City, Meera Joshi. Welcome to DD India, ma'am.
Thank you.
First, I'd like to learn from you the manner in which you reflect on your Indian American heritage and your experience of public service in this beautiful city.
So I think I look back to, my father came here decades ago now. He's passed now. But he came from a family of public service in India. And so in some ways, I feel like I'm continuing that tradition in America.
The importance that Indian American community represents in the larger diversity of New York, of the United States, what can you tell us about it?
You can see across the nation, Indians are playing a larger role in politics. They're taking leadership positions in roles that, this is the first year we've seen mayors, senators, congressmen, possible president. But the other way, and I'd say this is a smaller but a very significant way, we're making Indian culture part of New York City culture.
In the context of your work, one of the important challenges that is faced by New York City, as I understand, is the migrant crisis. What can you tell us about it, and what is being done to address the challenge?
So like many global cities that are the economic epicenter of a nation, we attract people that are looking for opportunity. And we've seen an influx of that in a volume and at a pace and in a short duration that is a historical high. The other thing about New York City is we are a sanctuary city. If you come here, we will house you, we will feed you, we will ensure that your child has a school to go to. That makes us unique, and that also makes us very popular. We've risen to the challenge. I'm not going to say it hasn't been a strain. It has been a strain. But we have really managed in a way that New Yorkers do when crisis calls. That is uniquely part of the spirit of the city. And now we're at a place where we're seeing it dissipate. So we're taking some of the tents down that we've had to use to house people. And now it's time to integrate. We're a city built on immigration, and this is the next wave of it. So we're happy to have people come. This is a city of opportunity. The pace has been hard to handle, but the ultimate integration is going to happen.
Finally, it must be a busy time for you as an administrator. You handle multiple portfolios, including infrastructure. It's also time for presidential elections. What are your key priorities for the city going forward?
Like every city around the world, we're going to be led by the climate crisis. We have to ensure that our infrastructure is well maintained and is ready to protect us for the times ahead. So part of what we do is ensure that we're building well. So I think that this is just the world we live in now, and resiliency and funding projects that fight the climate crisis are going to be bipartisan.
Thank you very much for speaking with DD India. That was the Deputy Mayor of New York City, Meera Joshi, talking about her Indian American heritage and key priorities at work, with camera person Jaishankar Shubhendu Ghosh for DD India in New York.
Vision 2030 of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia seeks to build on the strong bonds between expatriate communities in Saudi Arabia and the Saudi society. Under this vision, Saudi Arabia has launched the Global Harmony Initiative. So how is the spirit of integration and harmony evident in bilateral cooperation in the education sector? DD India's Munmun Bhattacharya reports from Riyadh.
An Indian school in the heart of Riyadh. The students that you see here are wards of members of the vibrant and sizable Indian community residing in the capital of Saudi Arabia. Some students can be seen outside their classrooms, some playing basketball and some badminton. While this was the first franchisee of Delhi Public School that was established in 2004 in this Arab country, the foundation of the first Indian international school in Saudi Arabia was laid way back in 1982. This was after the Saudis allowed the opening of such schools for students of the Indian diaspora and gave Indian authorities a free hand to run them. Schools like this one are run by the Indian community and are supported by the Indian Embassy. They are CBSE affiliated and follow CBSE guidelines laid out in India. Teachers that teach in these schools are qualified professionals that belong to the Indian community. Some Arabs teach here too.
The Saudi Arabian government and especially the Ministry of Education, they encourage Indians to open schools and they extend all kind of facilities and services to the schools. Particularly, they have allowed the female teachers to be employed by the schools, which was not the case earlier. So that has come as a big relief to the Indian diaspora schools.
Today, there are 38 Indian schools affiliated to CBSE in Saudi Arabia. Together, they cater to nearly 100,000 Indian students. These schools come under the umbrella of the Saudi chapter of CBSE. One of them, India International School Dammam, had even made it to the Guinness Book of World Records for enrolling the highest number of students at 18,000 in any secondary school in India or abroad. But the COVID-19 pandemic led to a dip in numbers 5 years ago. Today, the numbers have picked up again. Such cooperation between India and Saudi Arabia bodes well for the welfare of the Indian community in this Arab country.
The school that you see behind me is an international private school from India, DPS Riyadh. It stands testimony to the growing educational cooperation between India and Saudi Arabia. This is also a projection of a changing Saudi Arabia, which is more integrated with the outside world, particularly with friendly countries like India. With cameraman Pramod Negi, this is Munmun Bhattacharya from Riyadh for DD India.
And next we take a look at what else is making news around the world. Indonesia's capital has ramped up security ahead of President-elect Prabowo Subianto inauguration scheduled on Sunday. Thousands of military and police officials were seen preparing for the security drills on Friday ahead of the main event, which will also give farewell to the outgoing president, Jokowi. On Friday, Kenyan Senate voted to remove Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua by impeachment. Hours later, President Ruto nominated Kithure Kindiki as the new Deputy President. Gachagua has filed petitions challenging the move, following which a panel of 3 judges has been appointed to examine them. Famous boy band One Direction's Liam Payne died after falling from a hotel balcony in Argentina. The members of the band took to social media to express their grief and shock over the news. Fans all over the world are holding vigils and sang his songs in remembrance as condolences keep pouring in. Still to come on DD India News Hour. What Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar's death means for the conflict in Gaza. We break it down with our expert. India's Election Commission issues notification for the Jharkhand Assembly Elections 2024.
Complex issues, hidden agendas, twists and turns, strategic games. We think all dots are linked. We just need to connect them. Join me every week as I connect the dots to unravel hidden designs in statecraft, mysteries, and decode issues that matter to you. Watch Connecting the Dots with me at these times on DD India.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India News Hour. I am Tanvi Taneja. A quick look at the headlines we are tracking at this hour. World leaders hope that in Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar's death blooms hope of a truce in West Asia. US President Joe Biden to discuss Ukraine with allies on a swift swan-song trip to Berlin. In Malawi, India's President Draupadi Murmu holds bilateral talks with her counterpart Lazarus Chakwera on strengthening ties between the two countries. And going back to our top story now, Israel killing Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar, and we have with us Ambassador S.R. Thayal, former senior Indian diplomat. Welcome, sir, to the program. How far will Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar's killing affect the morale and the will to fight of Hamas?
It will very fatally almost affect the will of fight of Hamas. See, after the 7th of October last year's terrorist attacks by Hamas on Israel, Prime Minister Netanyahu and Israel had set some goals. That, of course, hostages, at the time there were more than 250, and that they should be released. Then complete destruction of Hamas as a terrorist organization. And third goal was that Hezbollah in Lebanon should be degraded. And of course, fourth objective, their long-term objective from a long time has been that Iran's nuclear capacity should be destroyed or should be restricted. Now, the first they, of course, killed Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran, who was the political leader of Hamas. And he was in Qatar and here and there, not in Gaza. He was killed in Iran. And the entire fighting force of Hamas, that was controlled by Yahya Sinwar. And now that he has also been killed, that means the top leadership of Hamas is now been assassinated. And many of the second-rank commanders, because after all, there have been almost 42,000 Palestinians have been killed by Israeli bombardment and land action, tanks, bombardments, air attacks in Gaza and in West Bank. So it is natural that that a large number of Hamas fighters would also have been killed in these among these 40,000 odd people. That and also Israel has almost sealed the border of Gaza towards Egypt, because a lot of supplies used to come from Egypt through tunnels into Gaza. All those tunnels have been destroyed and people have been moved back in Gaza from the Gaza Egyptian border. So there is no way that Hamas can get fresh supplies of ammunition or mortar making equipment or missile making equipment from Iran. So one can safely say that the fighting capacity of Hamas in Gaza has been severely degraded. Of course, there will be individual fighters with some weapons and some ammunition and some arsenal. So they can mount some resistance to Israeli forces which are in Gaza. But they will not be able to have a standing battle with the Israeli forces in the Gaza Strip for some time to come.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said that there could be an end to the conflict in Gaza if Hamas laid down arms and returned all hostages. But is that at all a likely possibility?
Now, there are some reports that within Gaza itself, the voices are rising against Hamas because the Hamas's actions have brought so much of death and destruction to the helpless people of Gaza that they just have had enough and they want to come to some kind of a compromise with Israel. And all the efforts, international efforts, have been in that direction. And that hostages should be released and there should be a ceasefire. But Israel was not agreeing to a ceasefire except for a very short ceasefire of 2 or 3 weeks. But now, if Israel's assessment could be that Hamas has been sufficiently degraded, then there is a possibility that there could be some kind of a ceasefire. But whether Hamas as an organization will declare that they surrender, that would mean not only the ammunition or arms which they have, but whoever are their fighters, still, they should also surrender, but there can be an amnesty for them. So there is a possibility of some kind of a ceasefire agreement. But Prime Minister Netanyahu yesterday in his statement said that yes, Yahya Sinwar has been killed, but this is not yet the end of the war. And so it is not clear what more does he want.
And several world leaders have also said that Yahya Sinwar's killing offers an opportunity to end the Gaza conflict. What is their reasoning? Instead, could Sinwar's killing have the opposite effect and stiffen the resolve of Hamas and its supporters and lead to a larger flare-up in the region? Already, Hezbollah has announced that a new and escalating phase of its conflict with Israel.
These statements are one thing, but for all the Palestinians and the Lebanese, they are seeing how Israel is succeeding in attacking Hezbollah. Nasrallah, their leader was killed, and now their leaders are being assassinated. The Israelis moving into Lebanon. Most of the South Lebanon has been occupied by Israel. So the reality is very different from whatever statements, maybe belligerent statements, which may be coming from Hezbollah or from Hamas. But the people of Lebanon and people of Gaza hopefully will understand that this is a conflict which they cannot win, and it can only bring more misery, more death, more destruction to the people of Gaza and people of southern Lebanon. And it is in their best interest that with the help of the international community, they come to some kind of a compromise with Israel.
And what about the fate of the about 100 Israeli hostages still held by Hamas? Could that be affected in any way by Sinwar's killing?
About 100 are unaccounted for, but even the Israelis believe that maybe 50 might have already been, because they were all in tunnels, and with this massive bombardment by Israel of all the tunnels and the hospitals and everywhere. So it is natural if the civilians are dying, then the hostages might have also died in that process. But there cannot be any ceasefire or deal by Israel unless all the hostages are accounted for. That means 101 who are still not accounted for, either their bodies should be available or they should be handed over back to Israel. Without that, Israel will not agree. We all know Prime Minister Netanyahu is a very strong person, and he doesn't listen to any country, even to the United States. So without that, no deal would be possible.
So in your view, sir, at this stage, what are the likely endgame possibilities of the current conflict in West Asia?
The endgame, as far as Gaza is concerned, is possible if the Gazans or Hamas, they hand over the all the hostages, and the international community is able to prevail upon Israel that they do not ask for surrender of the remaining fighters of Hamas, or there should be some kind of amnesty for them. Because if they are arrested by Israel, then they will be in jail for decades. So they will have no interest in accepting a ceasefire. So it is a complex diplomatic negotiation. But I would think that the Israeli Defense Forces, their assessment would be that in Gaza, their objective of degrading or almost destroying Hamas has been more or less achieved.
Indeed, a turning point in this conflict. Thank you very much, Ambassador S.R. Thayal, for being with us and shedding analysis on this valuable subject.
Thank you.
India's President Draupadi Murmu is in Malawi as part of a 3 African nation visit. The President held bilateral meeting with her Malawi counterpart Lazarus McCarthy Chakbera with a focus on issues to improve trade and economic ties between the two countries. Earlier in the day, the President visited the National War Memorial of Malawi and laid a wreath there. The war memorial was built in honor of soldiers and civilians who lost their lives in the First and Second World Wars. The President also visited the Kamuzu Mausoleum, the resting place of the first President, founder and father of Malawi, Dr. Hastings Kamuzu Banda. Defence Minister Rajnath Singh on Friday awarded the startups and MSME innovators of India who had developed cutting-edge disruptive technologies. The Dare to Dream 5 challenge was also thrown open for individual and industry innovators.
For respective clusters and noted academicians.
Defence Minister Rajnath Singh urged India's private sector to take the lead in defence manufacture and innovation.
वक्त आ गया है कि डिफेंस सेक्टर में प्राइवेट सेक्टर की भागीदारी को अब लीड लेना चाहिए। पार्टिसिपेशन की बात नहीं कर रहा हूं, बल्कि प्राइवेट सेक्टर को अब लीड लेना चाहिए। ऐसा मैं इसलिए कह रहा हूं क्योंकि प्राइवेट इंडस्ट्री के अंदर तेजी से हो रहे परिवर्तनों को न सिर्फ एब्जॉर्ब करने की क्षमता है, बल्कि नई चीजें क्रिएट करने की भी उनके अंदर क्षमता है।
Secretary, Department of Defence Research and Development, DRDO Chairman Dr. Samir Kamath said that the Technology Development Fund of DRDO provides funding of up to 10 crore rupees for innovative deep technology.
But the focus was on indigenization of subsystems and technologies which were present in the equipment of our services. However, it has now evolved where we are looking at the same scheme to develop cutting-edge technologies in all the emerging and disruptive new technologies that have emerged in recent times, or as they are called, deep tech areas.
Indians will be able to get the facility of Visa on Arrival facility while travelling to the United Arab Emirates. The new update will include Indian citizens and their family members who hold ordinary passports and will be granted visa on arrival at all ports of entry in the UAE. This new provision applies to holders of a valid visa, residence or green card issued by the US, European Union countries and the UK. It also stated that the passport validity period shall not be less than 6 months. Saudi national Nouf Marwai is the face of yoga in Saudi Arabia. At a young age, she was diagnosed with systemic lupus and autoimmune disease. But she took up yoga and that improved her condition and quality of life dramatically. Nouf has since played a pivotal role in expanding the reach of yoga in Saudi Arabia by contributing to its legalization and to it receiving official recognition in Saudi Arabia. DD India's Munmun Bhattacharya spoke exclusively to her in Riyadh on her life's journey and her meetings with Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
Nouf Marwai, a Saudi national who was awarded the Padma Shri, one of India's highest civilian honours, in 2018, is here with us in Riyadh. Welcome to DD India. You're a yoga instructor. Tell us about your journey, how you took up yoga and how that changed your life.
I started practicing yoga when I was 18 years old, when I was diagnosed with lupus erythematosus, an autoimmune rheumatic disease that affects the joints, the organs of the body. And my parents decided that they won't send me anymore to school because the doctor said I might not live for long. And I started practicing yoga and I went back to school. Yoga helped develop the quality of my life to a level that I went back to school and college, and I graduated with high honors from psychology. So since then I decided that I'm not going to leave this. I'm going to learn it in India itself. I started 19 1998, there was no social media, so I was promoting it through my college projects and programs. And then in 2004, I started promoting it in the media.
You've met Prime Minister Narendra Modi 3 times, you were telling me earlier. Tell us about your experience. How was the conversation like? What are your impressions of him as a leader?
I met him first time when I received the Padma Shri Award, and he did the Namaste, and he said, "You're a great yoga teacher for promoting yoga in Saudi Arabia." Actually, being a yogi himself and working toward the recognition of the Yoga Day by the United Nations and carrying this initiative around the world through the Indian missions, this is a lot to do. It's like the biggest health and wellness meet that happens in June every year. That's the biggest promotion, and as a leader, I think he's a visionary leader, and that speaks about, of course, again, about the relationship between Saudi and India, that yoga maybe built bridges of communication between Saudi and India.
Thank you so much, Noof Marwai, for speaking to us on DD India. So that was a conversation with a yoga instructor who's played a pivotal role in making yoga popular here in Saudi Arabia. With cameraman Pramod Negi, this is Munmun Bhattacharya from Riyadh for DD India.
And next we take a look at other stories making news in India. The Election Commission of India issued notification for the first phase of assembly elections in Jharkhand on Friday. This marks the beginning of the nomination process, which can be done both online and offline. The state will witness polls in 2 phases. 43 assembly constituencies will go to polls in the first phase, scheduled on 13th of November. With the AQI index hovering near the 300 mark, the national capital of Delhi recorded poor air quality index. On Friday, Delhi slipped to 293, worse than the previous day. People have been asked to stay indoors and use N95 masks when leaving their homes. The multilateral maritime exercise Malabar 2024, hosted by India and Andhra Pradesh's Visakhapatnam, concludes on Friday. Navies of Australia, Japan and the US have been participating in different phases of the drill that began on October 8th. Still to come on DD India News Hour. Beijing races to revitalize growth as China records the slowest GDP growth in the 3rd quarter of 2024. South Africa enters into the ICC Women's T20 World Cup final after beating defending champions Australia by 8 wickets. Welcome back. You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Tanvi Taneja. China recorded slowest GDP growth in the 3rd quarter of 2024 since early 2023. China's economy grew 4.6% year-on-year in July to September quarter, slowing from 4.7% in the 2nd quarter. Struggling housing market, slowing export growth and weak domestic demand are major challenges being faced by Beijing. Housing sales fell to 24% in the first 9 months of this year, and property investment declined about 10%. The European Central Bank cut interest rates on Thursday for the 3rd time this year, saying that inflation in the Eurozone was increasingly under control while the outlook for the bloc's economy was worsening. The Frankfurt-based institution reduced rates by a quarter point following a cut of the same size at its last meeting in September. The quarter point cut brings the rate that the ECB pays on banks' deposits down to 3.25%. Air travel is one of the biggest polluters the world is dealing with, but despite a globally growing willingness to rein in climate change, the number of planes in the sky is just going up. A solution to the problem might be electrically powered planes like the ones developed by Germany's Lilium. The company, however, is facing an uncertain future. Lars Holter is with Deutsche Welle and joins me from Berlin on the story now. Lars, so what's the latest news for Lilium?
Thanks for having me. So a short answer, Lilium needs money. Developing and building these electrically powered personal air vehicles, that is what they're actually called, because for now we're talking about small planes with just a handful of seats. Developing and building those is an expensive undertaking, and the company had asked the German government for loan guarantees, 100 million euros in total. Now, the state government of Bavaria, that is the company's home state, had signaled that it would extend such guarantees at least for 50 million euros, so half the amount, if the federal government would match that. But just yesterday, news broke now that Berlin wasn't willing to do so. It appears the Green Party says it can't vote for such financial help because of the obvious risk that the company could fail and then taxpayers would be on the hook.
Lars, tell us more about Lilium. Who has financed the company so far?
Well, so far it's all private investors. Among them are China's Tencent, there's Palantir and Honeywell from the US, and there's a few venture capital firms like the Pan-European Atomico, some banks as well. Also, the company is listed on NASDAQ. Together, all those private investors have put around 1.5 billion euros into Lilium, and they have actually told the company that they were willing to pony up another 32 million if the German government would do its part and do a loan guarantee. So with Berlin not acting, it actually threatens all the other inflows as well, and it also threatens the company's very existence. Lilium has said that they might go insolvent. Lilium is facing major snags and delays.
Thank you, Lars. Lars Holter reporting for us from DW Berlin. And time now for all the sporting action. And to give us the latest sporting updates, we have with us Deepika Mehto in the studio.
Good afternoon, Tanvi. Let's quickly get our viewers a quick look on what's happening in the ongoing India versus New Zealand match. Well, after bundling out the host for just 46, New Zealand had an amazing outing with the bat. Rachin scored a brilliant 134, while David Conway hammered 91 runs. Tim Southee also added a quick 65 runs to add salt to wound. New Zealand put 402 on the board, extending their lead to 356 runs. For India, Kuldeep Yadav and Ravindra Jadeja bagged 3 wickets each, with Siraj taking 2 and Bumrah along with Kuldeep scalping 1 each. New Zealand scored 402 runs, extending their lead. Rohit Sharma and Yashasvi Jaiswal have opened the proceedings. For India now, the hosts need to fire from the start and build a strong opening partnership to set the tone for the batters. In women's cricket, Anik powered South Africa into the ICC Women's T20 Cricket World Cup super finale with a commanding 74-run victory, leading her side to an 8-wicket victory over defending champions Australia. South Africa skipper Bulbadart won the toss and opted to bowl, with South Africa restricting Australia to 134 for 5 despite a late surge from the Aussies. Bosch's career best knock helped South Africa chase down Australia's total of 135 in just 17.2 overs. Captain Laura Wolverdart also contributed with a composed 42 from 37 balls before being dismissed in the 5th over. Favourites Australia in their first ICC tournament after Meg Lanning's retirement missed key player Aliza Healy due to injury and ended their campaign in semi-finals itself. Now, Noman Ali claimed 8 wickets as Pakistan spinners led the team to a 152-run victory over Team England in the second test in Multan on Friday to level the 3-match series at 1-1. Chasing 297 for victory on a turning track at Multan Cricket Stadium, England were all out for 144 in the 4th day's morning session. Skipper Ben Stokes was the top scorer for England with 37, but their frontline batters struggled against the turning ball. Noman was the pick of the bowlers as Pakistan claimed 8 for 46. The third and final test will take place in Rawalpindi from the 24th of October to determine the series winner. On to tennis now. Rafael Nadal is all set to lock horns with old rival Novak Djokovic for the last time before the Spaniard ends his illustrious career. The pair is all set to meet at the Six Kings Slam exhibition event in Saudi Arabia. Nadal lost 6-3, 6-3 to Carlos Alcaraz in the semi-finals on Thursday to set up a third-place clash against Djokovic, who was beaten by Jannik Sinner. World number 1 Sinner will meet Alcaraz in the finals at Riyadh. The 22-time Grand Slam champion, who announced his retirement last week, has faced Djokovic in 60 matches and has triumphed 29 times to the Serb's 31. The last time Nadal faced 24-time Grand Slam champion Djokovic was in the second round of the Paris Olympics, where he lost 6-1, 6-4. So those were the top highlights of the hour from the world of sports. Back to you, Tanvi.
Thank you, Deepika, for all this sporting action. And as we wind up, a former US lawyer turned Lego artist is showcasing his vibrant sculptures at the Art of the Bricks exhibition in Berlin. With 20 years of experience, he creates intricate life-size works and reimagines famous art pieces like the Scream. The Art of the Brick is a traveling exposition featuring sculptures made entirely from Lego bricks and is currently ongoing in the capital of Germany. Stunning Lego pieces there. That's all for this edition of DD India News Hour. Do let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. Connect with us on our different social media handles at DD India Live. And for those on the go, you can catch all the latest news and updates from India and the world on our DD India mobile app. The app is available on both Android and iOS platforms. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Tanvi Taneja from all of us here in New Delhi. Thank you for watching. Namaskar.